I'm Jason Epperson. This is Parkography, and it's time for the latest in national park and public lands news. Welcome to Parkography, everybody. This is our first official episode. Of course, many of you know us as the America's National Parks podcast in the past, or maybe you know me from the RV and camping news roundups over on the RV Miles YouTube channel. This episode is our first episode. It will be a news roundup of all the news that happened on public lands over the course of the last month. Most of our episodes will not be this. Most of our episodes will be storytelling about the history and the people that make America's public lands so special. But we are kicking off with a news roundup episode. Those of you familiar with my RV and camping news roundups over on RV Miles know that I try to present these with as little spin as possible. I try to uphold a level of journalistic integrity. This episode is going to be full of news about the White House and the Trump administration. And I want you to know that that's just what it is. There's a lot going on. The Trump administration obviously is new, and they are coming very fast with lots of plans and changes, and there's just a lot to cover. So we're going to cover that all here in an unbiased way. You're welcome to go into the comments and argue the heck out of it. But here I'm telling you what's happening on the ground, and I'm going to do that each and every month, and maybe even more often on Parkography, so that you can make decisions about who to vote for, where to spend your money, how to travel, all that sort of stuff. So without further ado, let's begin with the issue surrounding the fired federal employees and the reduction in workforce in the federal government, particularly as it relates to the National Park Service and other public lands. Most fired federal employees have been reinstated after the sweeping February 14th cuts to probationary workers were overturned by federal judges. Some portion of the reinstated employees are working again, while others remain off duty with pay until the Supreme Court potentially weighs in on the matter. The Trump administration has asked the court to pause an order by a federal judge in San Francisco that would require the federal government to immediately reinstate more than 16,000 probationary employees across the federal government. That judge found that federal agencies can fire their employees, quote, even at scale, but that the Office of Personnel Management has no authority to hire and fire employees in another agency. The Office of Personnel Management was directed by the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, to make the cuts, which was on top of some number of federal employees who took a buyout offer, allowing them to leave their jobs with 7 months' pay. Now, another buyout offer has been making the rounds in preparation for more employee cuts that will be more targeted and directly implemented by the individual agencies as part of a reduction in force. That's a technical term they use that's mandated by the White House. The overall reduction in force at the Department of the Interior, which is the agency that oversees the National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife, and others, has only been about 3%, according to the New York Times. But more cuts are likely on the way. Upon taking office, President Trump signed an executive order initiating a federal hiring freeze and requiring federal agencies to re-examine budgets and submit a reduction in force plan by April 20th. So we'll certainly be hearing more about this soon as the White House continues to attempt to reduce the overall federal payroll and expenditures. Meanwhile, DOGE has been cutting spending in other areas, one primary being the cancellation of federal building leases. DOGE has closed or is closing at least 679 federal facilities, which on the public lands front include the headquarters for the Buffalo National River and its water quality testing lab, the National Park Service's Archaeological Center in Tallahassee, Florida, a facility that holds over 8 million artifacts for dozens of national park sites in the Southeast, the San Antonio Missions Law Enforcement Facility in San Antonio, Texas, the park headquarters for Montezuma Castle and Tootsiegoot National Monuments in Arizona, the headquarters for the Flagstaff, Arizona National Monuments, Wupatki Sunset Crater Volcano, and Walnut Canyon, the Superintendent's Office and headquarters for the War in the Pacific National Historical Park in Guam, one of 2 visitor centers at the New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park, the headquarters for the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area in St. Paul, Minnesota, the Superintendent's Office for Flight 93 National Memorial, as well as Allegheny Portage, Fort Necessity, Friendship Hill, and Johnstown Flood, which are all managed by one superintendent together, and the headquarters and visitor center for the Missouri National Recreation River, and a large facility in Charlestown, West Virginia that stores some of the Park Service's museum collections, along with many sites across all the other federal land agencies. Last week, President Trump also issued an executive order directing the Department of the Interior to conduct a review of historic monuments, memorials, and similar properties for, quote, partisan ideology. The executive order, entitled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History, targets several agencies, including those under the Department of the Interior. The new executive order specifically calls on the Secretary of the Interior to determine whether properties within the department's jurisdiction, quote, have been removed or changed to perpetuate a false reconstruction of American history, inappropriately minimize the value of certain historical events or figures, or include any other improper partisan ideology. The order goes on to instruct the Interior Department to hunt for, quote, descriptions, depictions, or other content that inappropriately disparage Americans past or living, including persons living in colonial times, and instead focus on the greatness of the achievements and progress of the American people, or with respect to natural features, the beauty, abundance, and grandeur of the American landscape. Alan Spears, National Parks Conservation Association Senior Director of Cultural Resources, said the president's executive order could jeopardize the Park Service's mission to protect and interpret American history. The Trump administration has already erased LGBTQ content from historic sites managed by the National Park Service. The Trump administration has deployed hundreds of U.S. troops and armored vehicles to Big Bend National Park in West Texas, according to Newsweek. The move, part of a wider crackdown on illegal immigration, is a significant military mobilization along the United States-Mexico border. Troop deployment to West Texas began on March 13th, with 200 soldiers already on the ground. Army officials said that the number is expected to grow to 500 in coming weeks. Alongside combat vehicles, the deployment will include Humvee-style tactical vehicles, fuel trucks, and other support equipment. Officials said while troops will not be arresting individuals suspected of immigration violations, they will provide support to federal agents. The Posse Comitatus Act bans the armed forces from serving as civilian police. The Border Patrol's Big Bend sector experiences significantly fewer border crossings compared to other areas along the U.S.-Mexico border. In February, Customs and Border Protection reported approximately 165 migrant encounters in Big Bend, compared to 1,679 in Laredo and 2,623 in El Paso during the same period. Yosemite National Park may not, after all, return to having timed entry reservations this summer. On my last RV and camping video over on the RV Miles YouTube channel, I mentioned that the time entry reservation system would be returning, but that came from a press release that was leaked and not ready for public consumption. Now, Backpacker Magazine is reporting that the congressman who represents the area says he, quote, raised hell at the White House, causing the Park Service to put the plan on hold. Representative Tom McClintock, whose district includes Yosemite, told a gathering of a county business council that he was concerned about, quote, how much our gateway communities depend on tourism to Yosemite and how damaging the reservation system has been to visitation. He said that local hotel owners told him the uncertainty around the park's reservation program and lower European visitation caused thousands fewer bookings than usual, and that those owners felt there was no need to consider a reservation system in 2025. So we'll see if an actual release comes out or if there will be no timed entry at Yosemite this year at all. The website currently says, quote, Yosemite National Park anticipates sharing details about this year's reservation system in the near future. We recognize the importance of providing clarity on that system as soon as possible to accommodate peak summer season travel planning. We're grateful for the robust public engagement in this process to shape an improved and sustainable visitor experience. Department of the Interior Secretary Doug Burgum is taking immediate steps to open Alaskan oil resources. A press release said the Bureau of Land Management will pursue steps to expand opportunities for exploration and development in the National Petroleum Reserve in Alaska and the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The Bureau of Land Management will also work towards partial revocation of public land withdrawals that will help solidify the path forward for the proposed Ambler Road and Alaska liquefied natural gas pipeline projects. President Trump has directed the National Park Service to clean up Park Service lands in the District of Columbia. The new executive order mandates a comprehensive approach to improving the condition of federal parks in D.C. controlled by the National Park Service, including beautification efforts such as graffiti removal and enhanced park maintenance. The order also includes provisions to assist local law enforcement in their efforts to address public safety concerns, particularly violent crime and issues related to homelessness. In collaboration with local government, the Department of the Interior will focus on iconic areas like the National Mall and surrounding monuments. The Department of the Interior says the cleanup and beautification efforts will directly support the broader goal of revitalizing DC and reinforcing its status as, quote, a national city celebrated around the nation. A coalition of conservation groups is suing the White House over the U.S. Forest Service's Nantahala-Pisgah Forest Plan. This is actually a Biden-era plan that allows for a five-fold increase in logging that the groups say violates federal law by overlooking harms to forests, water quality, and wildlife. Quote, this disastrous plan broke the law and the hearts of millions of forest visitors, said Will Harlan, Southeast Director at the Center for Biological Diversity. The most popular and biodiverse national forest in the country should not be targeted for massive increases in clear cuts, especially after Helene. The hurricane did plenty of logging. We don't need 5 times more. The plan outlines where activities like logging and road building will occur and sets objectives for future timber harvests. Community organizations and conservation groups provided the Forest Service with a collaboratively developed plan that allowed for logging while minimizing harms to the forest. However, the proposal was rejected in favor of a plan that aims to quintuple the amount of logging in the Nantahala and Pisgah National Forest and expand logging and road building into sensitive habitats. The plan has seen widespread public opposition and more than 23,000 comments, said Ben Prater, Southeast Program Director for Defenders of Wildlife. Quote, instead of supporting rare species like forest bats, fish, mussels, and amphibians, this plan ramps up logging justified by faulty assumptions that are even more precarious in the wake of Hurricane Helene. This plan was built on the assumption that natural disturbances would create less than 200 acres open and young forest habitat a year. By that metric, Helene caused 400 years worth of disturbance to some of the most important habitats in the region in a matter of days. I'm still quoting here, the plan was already flawed and now is completely out of step with the realities on the ground. And a group called Wild Earth Guardians filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Forest Service for failing to provide Freedom of Information Act records about the agency's plans to dramatically increase logging in the Pacific Northwest. The documents relate to the Forest Service's timber targets, which is the amount of trees that each Forest Service region is expected to cut down each year. All told, nearly 6,000 pages of information were withheld from public disclosure by the Forest Service, according to the group. In February 2023, the Forest Service chief ordered an increase in the national timber target from 3 billion board feet to 4 billion board feet per year. The Pacific Northwest had already been identified as one of 3 regions in the country that should have the greatest increase in total timber volume sold. In order to meet that increased target, in December of 2023, the Forest Service announced its intent to amend the Northwest Forest Plan. The proposed amendment would weaken longstanding protections for wildlife in order to increase logging to meet those higher timber targets. A press release from Wild Earth Guardian says that these protections were put in place 30 years ago because extensive logging had severely degraded habitat for species that depend on old-growth forests for survival. The logging also caused massive amounts of erosion and sedimentation into streams and rivers, threatening many aquatic species, including many salmon populations. Other internal Forest Service documents that were obtained by Wild Earth Guardians demonstrate the immense pressure that the agency staff are under to meet timber targets. Job performance is measured by how much logging each national forest does. In fact, the Pacific Northwest region was recently punished for not meeting its timber target, resulting in some of its funding being redirected to other parts of the country. According to Colorado Public Radio, a district court judge in Colorado has halted the Bureau of Land Management's adoption incentive program that paid people to adopt wild horses and burros. An investigation by American Wild Horse Conservation found that many of the adopted animals ended up headed for slaughterhouses while the adopters pocketed thousands of dollars. The Adoption Incentive Program was implemented in 2019 and paid individuals $1,000 each to adopt a wild, unhandled horse or burro. Each person can adopt up to 4 animals per year, and there's no limit on how many times you can participate in the program. The investigation found that people were adopting the maximum number of horses, 4, and pocketing the $4,000, then flipping those horses into slaughter auctions. One group adopted at least 82 horses, bringing in $82,000 of taxpayer funds. The investigation found around 40 of their animals in kill pens and 2,100 horses and burros overall. As a result of Hurricane Helene's path through the southern Appalachian Mountains, the Blue Ridge Parkway in Virginia and North Carolina sustained significant damage last year. In addition to widespread damage to National Park Service facilities and resources, the park has identified at least 57 landslides of varying complexity impacting the parkway itself across nearly 200 miles in North Carolina. The good news is that repairs are moving along swiftly. Since Hurricane Helene, the National Park Service has conducted hundreds of facility and resource assessments, cleared tons of debris, and reopened over 312 miles of the 469-mile Blue Ridge Parkway in both states. Widespread tree fall, erosion, trail, and culvert damage occurred, and many structures, including many historic structures, were heavily damaged. The restoration work needed is complex, and some areas will take years to repair. Quote, as with surrounding communities, we have made significant progress, but the Parkway's path to permanent repair and recovery will be a long one, said Superintendent Tracy Swartout. The damage to the Parkway is unprecedented in its near 100-year history. We ask our many neighbors and visitors to remain patient as we work to reopen sections of the park as quickly as possible. Most of the work should end by late summer to early fall of this year. That's it for this month's National Park and Public Lands News Roundup. We hope you'll stick around. We hope you'll be here next week. We've got a great episode on witness trees, trees that have witnessed important events in American history. It's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to getting it out there. If you're listening on the podcast feed, we've got a video version you can check out over on YouTube that's just got the same information, but with some visuals. If you're watching on YouTube and you prefer an audio version, we're over on any podcast app and you can check us out wherever. Just wherever you are, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And if you could share this episode in Facebook groups or wherever you are on social media so people know that this resource is out there for them to discover. Thanks so much for being here, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.